All right, let's recap the last chapter. So, who was in that chapter? What did we learn about them? Well, in the chapter previously, Delphine plans this day of sightseeing in San Francisco, which is just over the bridge from Oakland where they're staying. And Fern and Vanetta, they've kind of settled into life in Oakland. They have friends that they're looking forward to playing with. They're not so keen on going on this adventure, really. Um, what seems important about this problem? Well, Cecile kind of gives Delphine the money to go to San Francisco, but she doesn't ask her where she's going. She just tries to tell the girls to not get arrested for stealing. And so it seems like she hasn't learned anything about her girls. They're not those kind of kids. But Delphine and the other girls, they kind of expect her to act like that anyway. And connection I'm making to the previous chapter is that Delphine is the one who's acting like a parent. She's planning the trip to go sightseeing. That's what a parent would normally do. And it sort of shows how Delphine is filling in the role of the parent for her sisters, because Cecile either can't or maybe she won't. I don't know. All right. Let's just remind ourselves of the lens. So as readers, we have to be paying attention to the character, not just their names, but also their traits, their relationships with each other, both the major characters and the more minor characters. We need to be paying attention to the point of view. How does the narrator feel about the different parts of the story? We've got to be look out for changes to character, the plot, maybe the setting, or maybe some of the lessons. And then, of course, we have to be looking out for a theme, some kind of lesson the characters are learning, or maybe a universal lesson, something that we can, most readers can walk away from the book. All right, wish we had a camera. Once we arrived in San Francisco, Fern stopped singing, "I saw something," and we stopped asking her to tell us what she had seen. We got off the bus and we were greeted by hippies hanging out by the bus stop. It wasn't right to stare at them like they were in an exhibit, but we couldn't help it. We didn't see many hippies in Brooklyn, not where we lived, and there were a whole tribe of them before us. All kinds of mostly white hippies with long hanging hair. You couldn't miss the guy in the green, red, and white Mexican poncho with a moppy hair covering his face. I'd have called it an afro except it was a white guy's head, and I wondered what made a difference. The hippies sat on the grass. One read a small book. 3 girls swayed while Poncho Man played his guitar. They must have been out protesting or were done for the day. Their signs lay on the grass. Peace, ban the draft, make love, not war. I wish I had a camera. Peace, sweet soul sisters. Poncho Man dipped his head as if pointing to his open guitar case. I don't know what made me say it, but instead of groovy man or peace, I said, power to the people. Ooh, so something you should know. A hippie, where people kind of back in this time period, who they're usually young white people with long hair who kind of dress differently, very untraditionally. They're usually someone who rejected sort of like these traditional rules for society, the traditional values. In the 1960s, San Francisco was a place where a lot of them flocked to. A lot of them were protesting the war in Vietnam that was going on at the time. Then Vanessa said, "Free Huey," and Fern said, "Yeah, free Huey Newton." That was when we met her, the flower girl. We had finally seen one. There were all kinds of songs on the radio about hippie girls with flowers in their hair. She had daisies in her hair, and she drifted over to us, her eyes all dreamy as she danced in her flowing paint-splattered dress. She took a daisy from her hair and gave it to Fern. Then she gave one to Vonetta, because Vonetta wasn't about to be overlooked. Peace is power, sweet soul sisters. We wanted to crack up, but save that for later. We took the flowers and dropped 2 nickels and 5 pennies in Poncho Man's guitar case. Even though I could have figured it out, I asked him where Grant Street was. He pointed east. We gave the hippies the peace sign and the power sign and walked over to Grant Street. So kind of this is interesting. The girls' reaction to the hippies is kind of very different from the reactions to the people on the plane at the beginning. They gave the black power sign, and they're saying free Huey Newton. So I'm already seeing a change from the beginning of the story when they were first arriving in Oakland. It seems like their time with the Black Panthers is sort of rubbing off on them. We were excited by the sight of metal rails in the street. The cable car was second on my list of activities. Our first activity was sightseeing in Chinatown. You know when you're in Chinatown. The buildings are just like they are in China. That's a temple, I told my sisters. I had seen the pictures in National Geographic magazine and in an encyclopedia. Nothing compared to actually seeing the roofs, like tiled lampshades or hats. Dragons of every color. Gold, red, blue, green, pink. Big heads with large fangs, big eyes, monstrous paws. We needed a camera. We shared a plate of dumplings and drank free tea. None of us could keep the dumplings between the chopsticks, so we used forks. After that, we found a place where all they did was make fortune cookies. They let us come in and watch the ladies slip fortunes inside flat yellow cookie dough, then fold the dough over. We bought 10 fortune cookies for $1. Our first fortune said, "You will travel far." I said, "We already did that." Still, I put each pink and white strip of paper in my shoulder bag as souvenirs. Now we could say we had real Chinese fortune cookies in Chinatown. We gawked at all the window offerings. Green statues that I learned were carved jade. China dolls, fans, silk and satin dresses with Nehru collars. I almost felt bad about them, about not having more money to spend. "I want a kimono," Vanada declared. "Me too, a blue one," Fern said. "A kimono is Japanese," I said, as if I knew the difference. "And we're in Chinatown." "It's the same thing," Vanetta said, "and I want one." "It is not," I told her, "and we have $5 exactly for the souvenirs, so you're out of luck." While we were arguing about what was Chinese and what was Japanese, I noticed this family of 5 tall, blonde people standing near us. I didn't eyeball them dead on, but I knew they were staring at us. My heart thumped fast. It was happening. That bad thing that happened to kids who went on excursions without their mother. I tried to shush Bonetta, who thought she was winning our disagreement. I had to get my sisters away from these starers. And then, what would I tell the police when they asked about our mother? We were cooked. When I turned, I found the 5 people smiling at us, their faces made long by high cheekbones and long white teeth. They waved. I'd seen white people before, on TV, at school, everywhere. These people didn't look like any white people I'd ever seen. Even their skin was paler, their hair more white than yellow. I listened as they spoke to one another, probably about us, using flugel-schlugel words. Then, instead of taking pictures of all the Chinese people and the temples and dragons, they pointed their cameras at us. Banana started to pose like a movie star, with one hand behind her head and another on her slim hip. I grabbed Vanetta in Fern's hands and said, "Come on." So this is kind of interesting. Delphine doesn't like these strange white people staring at them and taking pictures. And so I kind of wonder why these people would think it would be okay to take pictures and stare at other human beings like zoo animals. And it's kind of interesting that the girls would also maybe expect that to be normal for the people to be taking pictures of the Chinese people too. I checked my Timex. It was almost 1 o'clock. That meant our time in Chinatown was up, and we had to go on to our next activity, a ride on the cable car. We dashed over to where the metal rails ran along the street and waited. Sure enough, at 1 o'clock on the nose, we were on our next activity, a cable car ride from the tip top of Chinatown all the way down to Fisherman's Wharf. We climbed aboard, and I paid our fare. We stood because standing would be more fun than going down the hill. And what a hill it was. It was a thrilling look down, down, down. The streets rolled like a dancing dragon. Hirohito didn't know the first thing about a hill. We needed a camera to get this hill. How steep, how long. We were all the way down to the wharf, cheering from every clang of the bell. We were now near the wharf. There were palm trees, real palm trees with sturdy trunks. Down here, palm trees made sense. They stood as palm trees were supposed to stand, reaching up to the sun, branches spread out wide. Not like a sickly child, too small and slouched over in someone's yard in Black Oakland. When we got off, we could see the Golden Gate Bridge perfectly well. But we took turns looking through the telescope right there on the walkway. Gazing out at the bridge, I felt what I was almost on an airplane. It was the pure excitement of seeing the world. Even the seagulls were seagullier than the ones that flew and squawked around Coney Island. These wide-winged birds seemed bigger and majestic, both close up and far away. Or maybe it was that they could see and smell the ocean and the tar and the salt and wood from the wharf. I breathed in deep to get it all. Too bad there was no way to capture that wharf smell in a jar to take with me. For a minute, I forgot I was with my sisters. Then I remembered what Papa had said. and I stopped myself from falling into a whiff of salt air and flying off with the seagulls like some dreamy flower girl. I was happy to be there, and that had to be good enough. There was no need to get glazed-eyed and forgetful. So it seems like Delphine's really observant. She almost lets herself forget that she's supposed to be looking out for her sisters there. This is kind of like a side of her character that's kind of showing that. I wonder what Delphine would be like if she didn't have that big responsibility of her sisters. I wonder if she'd be the same person. We stopped in the gift shop on the wharf. The man behind the counter set his eyes on us real hard. At first, I thought it was because we were by ourselves, so I whispered to Vanetta and Fern to be extra well behaved. But then I heard Cecile's last words in my head. His hard stare was for the other reason that store clerk's eyes never let up. We were black kids, and he expected us to be in his gift shop to steal. When he asked us what we wanted, I answered him like I was at the center, repeating after Sister Bakumbu or Sister Pat. We are citizens, and we demand respect. I grabbed Fern by the hand and said, let's go. I had that Black Panther stuff in me. It was pouring out at every turn. I figured it was all right. Papa wouldn't have wanted me to spend our money where we weren't treated with respect. But I was sure Big Ma would have wanted us to say, yes, sir, and please, sir, to show him that we were just as civilized as everyone else. Ooh, so there's a big change here. So Delphine is using her training from the Black Panthers to respond to this racist store clerk who's sort of following them around the store, looking at them as if they're going to steal something. And this is something she never would have done before she came to Oakland. I think she probably would have, said yes, sir, or please, sir, or tried to do something to, like Big Mom would want her to do. We walked farther down the wharf and found an old lady with a wooden cart to buy our souvenirs from. She carried mostly postcards, silver spoons, thimbles, and tiny drinking glasses that said, "Welcome to San Francisco." Her cart wasn't as nice as the gift shop, but she was toothless and happy to get our nickels and dimes. Since we didn't have a camera, I thought buying 10 postcards for 50 cents would be the next best thing. I told my sisters to each pick out 3 postcards. 1 to keep as a reminder of our San Francisco excursion, 1 to mail to Pa and Big Ma, and 1 to send to Uncle Darnell in Vietnam. I'd figure out later what we'd do with the leftover postcard. At least now we finally had something to show for flying all the way to California. We took the cable car to the bus stop and took the East Bay bus back to Oakland. We talked and talked about all the things we had seen, and the hippies, and the tall, blonde, white people, and the red and golden dragons, and the steep hills, and the cable car, and the seagulls, and the dumplings, and everything. Wouldn't Cecile be surprised when we told her where we had went? Then I felt bad because we didn't get her anything from the souvenir cart. I hadn't thought of her at all, and guilt began to have its way with me. I told my sisters, we're selfish. We didn't buy anything for Cecile. Before we got too quiet, stewing in our selfishness, Vanetta said, she wouldn't want it anyway. Good old Vanetta. Fern and I agree with her. Surely wouldn't. In a way, I was glad to be back in Black Oakland. The sun's still shining. As much as I loved our adventure, I was always on the lookout in between just looking. Here I knew where everything was. The center, the park, the library, the city pool, Safeway, and Mean Lady Ming's. No one stared unless they were staring because they didn't like your shoes or your hairstyle, not because you were black or because they thought you were stealing. As much as we needed to go off and have our California adventure, it was nice to be back. Even if it wasn't our real home. I still carried my shoulder bag Brooklyn style, but it was now lighter, and I wasn't worried. So, interesting point of view here. Delphine is relieved to be back in Oakland. She's feeling relieved to be back there. And so I'm wondering why she's feeling relieved. I think it must be hard being in an unfamiliar place, by yourselves without, a parent. And I think it's also maybe a relief to be back to a place where you're not going to be treated like a curiosity or a criminal. We stopped inside Mean Lady Ming's and gave her all the change we had left, except for $2 bills. What can we get with this? Mean Lady Ming yelled something mean back in the kitchen, and in 10 minutes we had a brown bag smelling of fried rice and chicken wings. I figured one day of takeout food wouldn't hurt anything, but honestly, I was too tired and happy to cook. I was anxious to tell Cecile all about our vacation day. I wanted to show off how well I'd planned everything down to the minute, and then I knew what to do, and I wanted to see if she cared. We were a block away from the green stucco house, chatting and laughing. Then we stopped walking, all three of us. There were 3 police cars parked outside of Cecile's house, 1 in the driveway and 2 along the curb. Policemen lined the walk. Lights flashed on top of their cars into the streets, red, white, and blue lights everywhere. We inched up. The happiness knocked out of us. Cecile and 2 Black Panthers, hands behind their backs, handcuffed, being led out of the house and down the walkway. I could hardly breathe. Whoa, so just when Delphine is looking forward to like showing off her maturity and responsibility to Cecile, and she's just sort of like now getting curious to her reaction, she's seeing her mom being arrested. And so I'm wondering what feelings she might have at that moment. Fear, maybe? Helplessness? All right. Take a moment now in your notebook to do a quick summary. Who was in that chapter? What new things did we learn about them? What seems important and what are you learning about the problem? And how does that chapter connect to what was read earlier? And here's your question. When the girls go into the souvenir shop, Delphine notices that the clerk is staring at them as if he's expecting them to steal. Why does she react differently than how Big Mom would have probably expected her to? Use 2 details from the text to support your response.